I heard you were really excited about watching the recent Godfather reunion.
I wanted to go, but they streamed it on Facebook Live. Did you see that, the Godfather reunion?
Know.
I didn't get to see it, yeah.
For years, Alec Baldwin was one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, a performer whose career stretched across comedy, drama, and cultural influence. From acclaimed roles to late-night television dominance, his name once symbolized longevity and reinvention. But in recent years, that legacy has been overshadowed by a legal and personal ordeal that changed everything. Now, with the case reaching what many believe is the question remains, what does the end really mean for someone whose life has unfolded in the public eye for over 4 decades? The phrase "sentence is final" carries enormous weight, not just legally, but emotionally, professionally, and historically. For Baldwin, this moment marks more than a courtroom outcome. It represents the collapse of a career era, the loss of public trust, and a farewell to the version of himself audiences once knew. Supporters argue the story is more complex than headlines suggest. While critics insist accountability must stand above fame, behind the cameras and court documents lies a man facing irreversible consequences, ones that no award, performance, or past success can undo. Friends have gone quiet. Industry doors appear closed. And the public narrative has shifted from celebration to finality. In this documentary, we examine how Alec Baldwin reached this moment, what the final legal outcome truly signifies, and whether goodbye forever applies only to Hollywood or to something far deeper. Because when the spotlight fades and the verdict stands, what remains is not the actor, but the human cost of a legacy rewritten. Before his name became associated with courtrooms and controversy, Alec Baldwin represented something rare in Hollywood: longevity with relevance. He wasn't just an actor who survived changing trends. He adapted to them. Starting in television before transitioning into film, Baldwin steadily built a reputation as a serious performer with range. Early dramatic roles established his credibility, while later comedic performances expanded his reach to entirely new generations of viewers. By the 1990s, Baldwin had become a recognizable leading man, appearing in major films and working alongside some of the industry's most respected directors. His presence carried authority, intensity, and charisma. But what truly cemented his cultural status was reinvention. At a stage when many actors fade into supporting roles, Baldwin found renewed success through television satire and character-driven comedy. His work reached a level where his voice, mannerisms, and timing became instantly identifiable. Yet alongside professional success, Baldwin's personal life often unfolded under scrutiny. Public disputes, heated moments with photographers, and strained family dynamics occasionally drew headlines. While these incidents never fully derailed his career, they contributed to a growing public perception of volatility. Still, studios continued to hire him. Audiences continued to watch. The industry, it seemed, had accepted complexity as part of the package. Everything changed when Baldwin became involved in a tragic, on-set incident that would redefine how his career and character were discussed. What was meant to be a routine day of production turned into a moment that sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. In an industry accustomed to controlled environments and carefully managed risks, the event raised questions that extended far beyond one individual. Almost immediately, the story moved from trade publications to global headlines. Legal analysts, safety experts, and commentators weighed in. Some focused on systemic failures within film production. Others narrowed their attention to individual responsibility. Baldwin, once discussed primarily for his performances, became the central figure in a debate about accountability, power, and negligence. What followed was not a single moment of judgment, but a prolonged period of uncertainty. Legal proceedings unfolded slowly, accompanied by intense public speculation. Every appearance, every statement or lack thereof was examined for meaning. Baldwin's professional life began to stall. Projects were paused. Invitations disappeared. The silence from Hollywood was noticeable. For Baldwin, this period marked a profound shift. The rhythm of auditions, rehearsals, and premieres was replaced by legal briefings and procedural delays. Regardless of eventual outcomes, the damage to his public image had already taken hold. In the court of public opinion, nuance often gives way to certainty, and reputations are reshaped long before verdicts are reached. This story is not about conclusions. It's about transformation. About how a man once defined by craft and charisma found himself at the center of a narrative he could not control. It's about how quickly success can be eclipsed when tragedy enters the frame, and how fame, and how fame, fame, how fame's the only, and how fame, and how fame. Once a shield can become a magnifying glass dot as the legal process continued. One truth became unavoidable. Alec Baldwin's life had entered a from which there would be no return to normal. Whether history would view him with sympathy, criticism, or something in between remained unresolved. But the first of this final act had been written not by a scriptwriter, but by circumstance. As the legal process moved forward, the situation surrounding Alec Baldwin became increasingly complex. What initially appeared as a tragic workplace incident slowly transformed into a broader examination of responsibility within the entertainment industry. Investigators, legal professionals, and safety experts all began asking the same difficult questions. How did this happen and who was accountable? For Baldwin, the experience was unlike anything he had faced before. Unlike public controversies of the past, this was not something that could be addressed with an apology, a statement, or time away from the spotlight. The legal system moved at its own pace, and every step forward seemed to bring new scrutiny. Court filings, procedural updates, and legal commentary dominated headlines, often reducing a deeply human tragedy into simplified narratives. One of the most significant shifts during this period was how Baldwin was perceived publicly. For years, he had been treated as a powerful industry figure, someone with influence, experience, and authority on set. That status now worked against him. Critics argued that experience came with greater responsibility, while supporters maintained that systemic failures, not individual intent, were being overlooked. The divide grew sharper with time. As proceedings continued, Baldwin's presence in Hollywood noticeably faded. Casting announcements no longer included his name. Industry events passed without him. Even projects unrelated to the case became difficult to pursue. Studios, already risk-averse, hesitated to associate with ongoing legal uncertainty. The unspoken reality was clear. Regardless of final outcomes, association itself had become a liability. Behind the scenes, Baldwin's personal world was also changing. Legal stress has a way of narrowing life's focus, and those close to him reportedly watched as routine normalcy disappeared. Travel plans revolved around hearings. Conversations centered on strategy rather than creativity. For someone who had spent decades living by production schedules and artistic momentum, this pause felt absolute. What made the situation even more difficult was the constant presence of public opinion. In the digital age, legal nuance rarely survives social media cycles. Short clips, partial statements, and speculation spread faster than verified facts. Baldwin's silence was often interpreted as indifference, while speaking risked misinterpretation. There was no winning position. The case also forced the entertainment industry to confront uncomfortable realities. Discussions around on-set safety intensified. Long-standing practices were questioned. Training protocols, oversight structures, and accountability measures came under review. While Baldwin remained the most visible figure in the story, the ripple effects extended far beyond him. As months turned into years, the idea of resolution became almost abstract. The legal process was not just determining outcomes, it was reshaping identity. Baldwin was no longer simply an actor dealing with a case. He had become inseparable from it. His name evoked not roles or performances, but proceedings and consequences. By the time the case approached its final stages, the sense of inevitability had settled in. Whatever the conclusion, the version of Alec Baldwin that once existed in the public imagination was gone. Careers depend on perception as much as talent, and perception had already shifted. 2 is about endurance, not triumph or defeat, but survival through prolonged uncertainty. It captures the period where waiting itself became the punishment, and where every day carried the weight of an unresolved future. For Baldwin, this marked the slow realization that some stories don't end, with redemption arcs only, with acceptance of irreversible change. As the case moved toward its conclusion, the atmosphere surrounding Alec Baldwin shifted from speculation to inevitability. By this stage, the legal process itself had already taken much of what once defined his life. Courtrooms replaced studios. Lawyers replaced directors. and the future, once mapped out in projects and performances, narrowed into a single question: what happens after this is over? For Baldwin, the final phase of the case carried a different kind of weight. It wasn't only about legal consequences anymore. It was about permanence. In Hollywood, time away can sometimes be forgiven. Scandals can fade. Careers can be rebooted. But this situation existed outside the usual rules of comeback culture. The gravity of the event made it clear that no amount of past success could restore what had been lost. Observers noted a visible change in Baldwin's public demeanor. Gone was the sharp wit and combative confidence that once defined his interviews. In its place appeared caution, restraint, and fatigue. Whether intentional or not, his presence suggested someone who understood that the outcome, whatever its final form, would permanently alter his place in the world. The industry's response was equally telling. Silence replaced criticism, but silence can be more revealing than outrage. Studios avoided public comment. Colleagues stopped mentioning his name. Even those who once defended him grew distant, not necessarily out of judgment, but out of self-preservation. Hollywood moves forward quickly. An unresolved controversy rarely earns patience. This period also marked a psychological shift. For someone accustomed to control over scripts, performances, and public image, Baldwin now existed within boundaries he could not influence. Decisions were no longer creative. They were procedural. And the lack of agency proved more damaging than public criticism ever had. What made this especially painful was the realization that the case had come to represent more than an isolated incident. It became symbolic of a broader cultural shift, one where power no longer insulated individuals from consequence. For decades, celebrity had functioned as a buffer. This time, it did not dot as discussions of final judgment intensified. The phrase "sentence is final" took on layered meaning. It referred not just to legal closure, but to professional exile. Baldwin's future in mainstream entertainment no longer seemed uncertain, it seemed unlikely. Casting him now carried risk without reward, controversy without upside. For longtime fans, this reality was difficult to reconcile. They remembered performances that once defined eras, characters that shaped pop culture. But memory does not outweigh momentum. And momentum had moved on without him. 3 captures the moment when hope quietly exits the room. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow understanding that some losses cannot be negotiated, that some doors do not reopen. And that fame, when stripped of opportunity, becomes a reminder rather than a shield dot. By the time the verdict stood close enough to touch, Alec Baldwin was no longer fighting for reputation. He was preparing for life after relevance. Whether that life would be private, reflective, or silent remained unknown. But one truth was unavoidable: the career that once defined him had already reached its end. Long before the final word was spoken, with the legal proceedings now concluded and the sentence declared final, Alec Baldwin's life has entered an irreversible. For decades, Baldwin had been one of Hollywood's most recognizable figures, navigating film, television, and public life with confidence and authority. From dramatic roles that showcased his depth to comedic performances that became cultural touchstones, he had built a career few could rival. But now, the final verdict has cast a shadow over his professional and personal legacy, signaling an end to the era audiences once knew. The phrase "goodbye forever" resonates on multiple levels. Professionally, doors that were once open are now closing. Studios and collaborators, cautious about association, are hesitant to involve him in future projects. Opportunities that once flowed with his reputation are no longer guaranteed. Even longtime fans may struggle to separate the actor from the controversy that has come to define the public narrative. In the blink of an eye, a career built over decades has been reframed, not by performance, but by circumstance. Yet the consequences extend beyond Hollywood. For Baldwin personally, the finality is profound. Friends, colleagues, and peers have quietly reassessed relationships, and the network that supported him through years of triumph now exists within strict limitations. Daily routines once guided by creativity, rehearsals, and performances have been replaced by reflection, media scrutiny, and the long-term emotional weight of accountability. In a world where reputation is currency, Baldwin now faces the cost of a life dramatically altered. The story of Alec Baldwin's sentence is also a cautionary tale about the fragility of fame. No amount of talent, influence, or experience can insulate someone from the consequences of critical events. Hollywood may celebrate reinvention, but some moments are irreversible. The court of law has spoken, and the court of public opinion has already passed judgment. The Baldwin who once commanded the screen, interviews, and public attention exists in memory more than in reality. Despite the professional and personal ramifications, this offers a sobering clarity. Baldwin's journey underscores how quickly circumstance can redefine legacy. It reminds both audiences and artists that influence, once considered a shield, is fragile. Actions have consequences, and even a career marked by decades of excellence cannot always withstand the fallout of a single defining moment. As the lights fade on this of his life, one truth is undeniable: Alec Baldwin's era in Hollywood, as audiences once knew it, is over. The sentence is final, the opportunities are diminished, and the public narrative has shifted irreversibly. Whether he finds peace, reinvention, or reflection in private life, the world has already marked the end of an era. For the actor, the public figure, and the man behind the fame, the phrase goodbye forever may indeed define the final act.